I wanted to talk about magnet designation and how I was disappointed to learn what I'm about to tell you. Hello, ladies and gents. I'm Glenn, aka Nurse Dad, former Navy Hospital Corpsman and current ER nurse. And I'm a little bit delayed today because the camera I wanted to use, there was a connection issue, but as the Marines taught me, adapt and overcome. So not my preferred camera, but it'll do. I'm going to enjoy this podcast today. There's no guests. It's just me and you. I'm going to be talking about a few controversial issues here, but in the end, let's just have a good time. I appreciate the growing audience of Nurse Dad podcast. You can find me on Instagram at nurse.dad. Also, my YouTube at nurse/dad. That's where I post full-length episodes, stories, and clips. And of course, you can find all the information you need about the Nurse Dad podcast at my website, www.mynursedad.com. And when you go on that website, there'll be a pop-up for a free guide. And in this free guide that I made, you'll have a nursing sheet designed by me. So for all you new grads, novice nurses, take a look at that. Really helps organize the information that you need. Because I find that a lot of these nursing sheets are not made by nurses. They have way too much information on them. So I break it down to brass tacks, give you what you need. Also, there's within the guide is a smaller guide, nursing tips for multitasking, and also for all types of students, my tips that I developed, study techniques that I developed in the military and as a 30-something-year-old nursing student that allows you to achieve the grade that you want to achieve, but not shut down your life that I saw so many people doing. Still retain your hobbies. Just tricks that I learned that helped me study, maximizing my time, because it's all about, working hard, playing hard, but also working smart. And it doesn't have to be so intense, studying and getting good grades. You can actually have a life at the same time. And I find that you'll actually study better and retain more the more fun you're having. So go to mynursedad.com. You'll see the pop-up, fill that out. And I do want to start a newsletter. I've been a little lackadaisical on it. There's a lot of moving parts here. So soon there'll be a newsletter out. But yeah, check that out. I want to do a shout out to Nursing is Wild. That's her Instagram handle. We have a mutual friend who's actually on this podcast. She goes by Citizen Nurse on Instagram. And Nursing is Wild, she is a 12 years, oncology nurse. Oncology is a field, if I had to get out of the emergency department, oncology is the only other field that I would like to go into. Unfortunately, it is expanding. I read an article recently that by 2050, the lethality of cancer will increase 48%. Unfortunately, cancer is on the rise and the lethality of cancer is on the rise. It is an expanding field. I didn't know this would happen when I first became an ER nurse, but I have a pretty fair amount of experience with cancer patients accessing their ports or just treating them in general, not so much for their cancer. You'll get cancer patients who, tragically, sometimes they come in pain and there's just nothing working out for them and they just want some kind of pain management. Or they come in with other ailments because, their immune systems are not where what they need to be. And, they get sick with other things. Sometimes the cancer's spreading, the metastasizing, and they're coming in with, dizziness or whatnot, and they get some bad news. So I have experience with oncology, and that is a field that I would pursue in the future if I ever want to get out of the emergency department. So yeah, shout out to Nursing is Wild because she messaged me and she asked me for my next podcast if I would talk about life after nursing school. So it's May as of this podcast, and there are going to be a lot of new graduates out there soon. And so she asked me, how easy or hard can it be to get that first nursing job? Of course, this is based on my perspective. So I'm going to lead with my first nursing job and go from there. My first nursing job was in Philadelphia. I had transferred out of my initial school, which I'll get into later, which was in New York City, and I went to Philadelphia. I was very happy to go to Philadelphia. My first time, actually my second time, but I never really got to see Philadelphia. Sylvester Stallone, Rocky, an iconic fictitious figure, and also an iconic man as a role model for me. I love the Sylvester Stallone story. So I was very happy to go to Philadelphia. It just felt like, especially after the military, you want to talk about Dante Alighieri's La Vita Nuova, which is a poem he wrote before the Divine Comedy called The New Life. Talk about the new life. I felt on top of the world. I was finally getting my degree in nursing or going to nursing school. And Philadelphia was perfect. And I loved Philadelphia. I loved that you could ride your bike everywhere. In my view, they had better food than in New York. And yeah, I loved it. So my first job was in West Philly. I thought I was going to settle in Philadelphia. So after nursing school, I got hired at a Catholic health for a Catholic health system. This hospital was in West Philly, the type of neighborhood where I was advised if I'm walking to work, wear your nursing scrubs because it may be the only thing that makes the locals leave you alone. So it was a dangerous area. Uh, what are you going to do, right? So it was a step down ICU. I got the job by applying to it on Indeed. I think it was Indeed.com. The lady next to me, she was training for the ICU. I was training for the step down ICU. It was just the luck of the draw. And what was interesting about this job was the step down ICU was located within the actual ICU. So in the room adjacent to you, you could have an actual ICU patient, and um, so having that access, to a knowledgeable person like that, especially a first year nurse. Now, I was a Navy Hospital Corpsman, but in all honesty, I was treating healthy young men for the most part. So it was a very challenging and somewhat nerve-wracking experience. I had a great preceptor, Candy, taught me the value of charting and like really charting and crossing your T's and dotting your I's and not just on the chart, but doing your job and doing it well. She was very old school. I was very grateful to her. And this was the kind of job where before you even saw your patients, you had to print out the cardiac strip and use a caliper and measure the between waves, the whole thing. We all know what that is. So that was pretty cool to have to start that and really you really had to know your patient. And the rule was like if you had 4 to 5 patients, you wouldn't get more than 2 trach patients. But there were shifts where I had 4 trach patients. Yeah, you learn trach care really well over there. I think I have a caliper on the side. Let me show people. Uh, yeah, caliper. I always want to say caliber. So yeah, here it is. And this is where you measure between waves on the strip. Now, I would never say this. I would never endorse this for anyone to do. But if you're walking to your car late at night or in a dangerous neighborhood, I would never say that this seems to make a fabulous weapon for self-defense purposes. I would never say that. Never. I would never say that. So that's a caliper. Yes, that was my first job. Now, how things have changed over the years. Oh, by the way, I obviously relocated back to New York with my wife. It was just, one of those things. So I left that job after only 9 months. And then after that, I became an ER nurse. Back in a time before COVID where you still had to kind of audition to be an emergency department nurse because they weren't hiring new grads. Things have changed since then, but that's how it was then. I really had to prove myself for that job. But nowadays, if you're a new hire, you're probably going to counter a nurse residency program. It's either 1 year or 2 years. I've seen either or. And this is a topic I covered on one of my podcasts with Nurse Nico. He is a travel nurse originally from the Carolinas. He relocated to the West Coast. He's currently in California. So with the nurse residency programs, this is the skinny of it. You start a new job, and for a year, for 2 years, you're going to be on a bit of a probationary period. You're going to have a class, I think, like once a month to sort of like kind of touch base on how things are going. They're going to put you in different departments of the hospital, which, as much as it may feel like a drag for those that just want to do one thing, I think that's a great opportunity to get a taste of different departments. And after that time, you're hired, right? um, but if you quit before the residency is done, you may owe money. Now, on the West Coast, according to Nurse Nico, a lot of hospitals will give you a bonus at the end of the nurse residency program, like $30,000 or something. And if you quit before then, you won't get that bonus. On the East Coast, I could tell you that there is no bonus. And if you quit, you may owe money. Let me hit you with a fact. So approximately 50% of nurse turnover occurs within the first year. So that's probably why they have the nurse residency program. They want to retain more nurses. I mention this because when you sit across from those eyeballs interviewing you, these are going to be facts that are going through their mind. Are you treating this potential first job, as more of a gig than an actual career path? So my advice would be to young people, take some of that nervous energy and let the person who's interviewing you know in so many words that you are the type of person you're looking for a job, you're looking for a home, you're looking for a place that you want to stay at. You know what you want in life. At least you have an idea. You can talk about future plans, going back to school, because most hospitals and organizations, they have tuition assistance. That's something that hospitals like to hear, because if they want, sometimes the catch is they provide you with tuition assistance and you have to work for them for a certain amount of time. Make yourself marketable. You don't have the credentials, or you don't have at least like a track record or a history because you just became a nurse. Show them a bit of your character. Show them that you have roots, that you have plans, that you are a grounded individual. That could give you an edge over some people your age or just new to the profession. I'm going to talk about nursing school, my views on nursing school. And then after that, I'm going to talk about something about Magnet certification that really disappointed me years ago on the floor in the ER when I heard about this, because I had worked at a Magnet hospital at the time. So something that disappointed me with with the Magnet designation. But before I do that, let's talk about nursing school. There's a lot of great things about it, and there are things about it that I find very disagreeable. Again, I'll talk about my journey, right? I was a Navy Hospital Corpsman. I served with a lot of Marine units. I served with a Navy unit. I got out after 5 years of active duty. I took my GI Bill back to where it all started for me, New York City. I went to a city college. I left that college after one semester. So why did I do that? Well, one, I was sitting across from the counselor before I was even going to start the school. And his attitude was like, well, you should choose a second major or a major that you could do just in case you don't make it as a nurse. And I'm thinking to myself, before I even started school, this is what you're telling me? That it's a tough program. I may not even get into it. I should choose something else. And I'm thinking to myself, I made a decision to become a nurse over 5 years ago at this time. I served my country. I was in the field. I was a Navy Hospital Corpsman. I was certified to do a trach, put in a chest tube, do a needle thoracentesis. Like, you're telling me I may not make it in your program? Like, I was up yours, buddy. I didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking. So, I cocked my head and I'm like, okay, noted. And then as it went on, I learned that the program that I was at, they expected you to complete all your prereqs. And of course, by completing your prereqs, you're paying for them. And not all prereqs transfer to other schools, right? So they expect you to complete your prereqs, and then they give you a 100 question math test. And I'm not talking about a med math test. I'm talking about real arithmetic. And I was told that if I didn't get at least an A minus, I had no chance of getting into the nursing program. So, no thank you. I think why this school could afford to do that was, you have a lot of international students, a lot of people who want to go to school in New York City. This school at the time was ranked 99th in the country, their nursing program. And so it wasn't like, in my view, some amazing nursing program, but they're located in New York City. They can afford to be highly selective. Again, Marines, they taught me adapt and overcome, and so I did. I I took my GI Bill and I went to a university in Philadelphia, a much better university, Drexel University. Um, I also had to use what's called the Yellow Ribbon Program. So some schools, the GI Bill won't cover all of the tuition, but there's also the Yellow Ribbon Program that's also available that kind of covers the rest of the cost. And if you have any questions about that, if you're a veteran, DM me. I can talk to you about the Yellow Ribbon Program and GI Bill. So yeah, I went to Drexel University. I had a great experience, but you know, the following comments I'm about to make I'm not singling out any university over anybody else. This just seems to be something that I've encountered across the board in talking to people and reading articles. I know of a program that was moving its nurse killer classes from freshman year to sophomore, even junior year. And what's a nurse killer? A nurse killer is typically a prereq, and it's just a class that they know there's going to be a certain amount of students that they're not going to make it. It's a roadblock for them. They're going to either have to transfer schools to get into another nursing program where hopefully they'll be able to complete that program, or they're going to have to change majors. Now, for me, my nurse killer, or potential nurse killer, was chemistry. One of the chemistries that I took. I had a real problem with the math element. Now, in my view, math that involves converting moles, mass, and the number of particles using Avogadro's uh, number for molar mass, or whatever that equation is an unfair and, in my view, unjust nurse killer. Luckily, I could afford $50 a pop for a tutor. The school did provide a tutor, but it was more of a group thing, and I'm definitely a one-on-one learner, especially when it came to I may not be able to complete this nursing program. I was like, we are going to work one-on-one. I don't care what the cost is. I was able to do that. Some people aren't so lucky. So I was able to cater my tutoring for me. Like again, some people not so lucky, and it was this moles and mass and number of particles thing that was tripping me up. And like I said, I don't know what that has to do with nursing, but according to some older nurses, nobody had to do that in nursing school back in the day. But why move a nurse killer? That's really what I'm trying to get at. I don't want to sound caustic, but it seems to me you may be trying to string along people, and they find out later than they could have that maybe the program isn't for them. Now they have to transfer schools, and you got more classes out of them, right? More money. And some of them have to change majors. And a lot of people stay in the same school when they change majors. And you change majors sophomore, certainly junior year, you may have to go to school another year. So they got you for more money. Like I said, I don't know what the reasons are. It just seems like that might be one of the reasons. That's my take on nursing school. Also, if you were to do a diagnostic on a lot of programs, and I read a bit about this, a lot of programs are more focused on incoming freshmen than retaining students or producing actual nurses. Now, in my experience, all my nursing professors showed the type of integrity that the nursing profession is steeped in. They were professors and they were active nurses. I just wish that these programs showed that same level of integrity. So that's my little spiel on life after nursing school and nursing school itself. Like I said, nursing is wild on Instagram. I hope you're happy with that. All right, a little intermission. Take a sip over. This is an old school canteen. My wife got this for me. Funny story, the cap had broken. So this is a new canteen made in the old style, and the cap had cracked. So what do, right? I thought I was going to go on Amazon and buy a new one. Didn't work out. I bought one. It was like a cheap modern one. I couldn't get anything to really fit this canteen. So I went on eBay, and it wasn't that much money actually, but this cap is from World War II. was the only cap I could find. It's actually from World War II. It's from the 1940s. I used to bring this to work, this metal canteen. I'm sorry for those who can't see the image but are only listening. It's a metal canteen. Because the metal holders, one, you don't have to worry about plastic particles, but they also retain coldness a lot better. But it looks like a big flask. So when I brought it to work, it raised some eyebrows. So I wanted to talk about magnet designation and how I was disappointed to learn what I'm about to tell you. I'm not criticizing the validity of being a magnet hospital. A magnet hospital, especially for those in the healthcare profession, we know this. It just means that a hospital is higher caliber, not caliper with a P that measures cardiac rhythms. I'm talking about caliber. It is a higher caliber hospital. If you are magnet designation, that's what we all pretty much assume. And that may be true. That may be true. I'm not refuting that. I'm just going to state why I was disappointed. I'll get right to it. The magnet application fee is a non-refundable $6,000. So what, right? Okay, fine. They're making millions of dollars, these places, right? But in order to retain your magnet designation, a healthcare organization is expected to pay between $60,000 and $120,000 per 3-year period. Now, I was disappointed to hear that because, and you know what, and this is kind of a rumor or hearsay, but I heard at the place that I was working at, because of its sheer size, it was closer to 200,000. I can't prove that, but what is actually in black and white writing is 60 to 120,000 per every 3 years. Yeah, I was disappointed to hear that because what is promoted is that when you're a magnet hospital, you really earned it. It's like being an all-state athlete, right? I was all-state in football, in defense and offensive tackle back in my high school years, all New York State. I earned that. I was the best in that position in New York State. Wasn't paid for. There were no other. That was me, like any all-state athlete or any athlete recognized, right? Like you're the best. That's what you earned. So you kind of transfer that mentality to something like this. But the fact of the matter is, you could be the greatest hospital in the world, but if you don't pay that money, you will lose your magnet designation. And what's important about talking about it, the reason I'm talking about it, and like I said, I've worked at magnet hospitals and non-magnet hospitals, and it does feel like a higher caliber when you work at a magnet hospital. A little thing. This is so basic, but at a magnet hospital, you'll never see a badge worn at the hip because a patient should be able to look at you directly and know who you are, your credentials, all that stuff. And I agree with that. Non-magnet hospital, you may see the badge, who knows where it is. So that's like an example. 8% of hospitals, I think 475, as of when I researched, are actual magnet designated hospitals. And a magnet designated hospital can make a little over $100, like about $120 extra per discharge, which obviously adds up. And if you're a magnet hospital, more people want to work for you and more patients want to go to you. But what's important is that it's important to have transparency. When someone sees the magnet designation, they're thinking it's completely on merit and that place is better than the place that doesn't have the magnet designation. Now, I'm not saying that hospitals that have a magnet designation are not better than any hospitals that don't have a magnet designation. I'm just saying, do your research. I think it's unfair that there may be hospitals or healthcare organizations that are in certain parts of the country, maybe they don't, they just can't afford that $60,000 to $120,000, I guess, maintenance fee to remain a magnet designation. And there are surveys and inspectors that come and make sure that you're upholding the magnet standard. I'm not saying it's just based on that fee, but like I said, if you're the best hospital in the world and you don't pay that $60,000 to $120,000, you're not going to be magnet designated. So for someone to just think it's totally based on merit. That's not true. Like nobody can take my 1999 All-State defense and offensive tackle, win away, award away. They can't do that. But this can be taken away based on money. I think it's important that people know that. I was very disappointed when I learned that, and it's something we don't talk about. Now, why do I have the right to say that? I'm not trying to be controversial for the sake of being controversial or pick apart anything. I'm not knocking a magnet designation. I'm just pointing out that it's not based really on merit, which is what I thought originally. And it's not fair to discredit a hospital that they're lesser or that their staff is lesser based on the fact that they don't have a magnet designation. And if you're looking for a hospital for any particular reason and you see the magnet designation, don't just go off that alone. That's all I'm saying. I'm not being controversial for the sake of being controversial. When the third leading cause of death in the United States is medical errors or misdiagnosis, then we need to know who we're putting in charge of our care. Research that hospital. Don't just rely on that symbol, on that piece of paper. That's why I'm talking about it. But that's what I wanted to talk about with regards to the magnet designation, because it is prestigious. And like I said, I've worked for either or hospitals wise, and it is a tight ship, more of a tight ship, and I'm in a magnet designated hospital, but there is a money component. And I guess the reason also that I'm talking about it is I'm so disappointed about that money component. Because as a man who's getting older and as a nurse who's in this business longer and longer, in patient care business, it's a mixture. You keep hearing, I'm not naive. I know how the world works, but boy, I cannot stop being disappointed every time I learn about the money element. It's never good news. For example, the Yale School of Medicine, I mentioned this in another podcast. They did a review of 88 large healthcare systems over a 20-year period, and they found that 95% of the net income went to stockholder payouts. That's right, 95% went to stockholder payouts. 5% of the money went to patient care and staffing and all that stuff. 5%. 5%. It just rips me. Because as a nurse, you've seen people slip through the cracks. We as nurses, as healthcare providers, doctors, everybody, we put patients first for the most part. Some bad apples, like everything else, but we put people first. But do the healthcare systems do? Seems like they don't. Which, like I said, it's a business. I get it. Now, I would have thought I wouldn't expect 50-50. We know how much CEOs make and CFOs and COOs, and I wouldn't expect 50-50. I wouldn't expect 60-40. Maybe 70-30. 70% went to stockholders, 30%. I mean, if I had heard that it was 80-20, I would have been like, you guys got to do better. That's pathetic. That's shameful. 95%. 95%. Because like the nurse shortage is very real, right? It's very real. But it's not just because there aren't enough people who want to be nurses. If you're going to talk about nurse shortage, which is in part due to the fact that they just won't hire enough of us because of the overhead. Hey folks, I said overhead, but let me correct myself. I meant staffing. 50% of the hospital's financial expenditure goes to staffing. So of course, they're going to be very selective when it comes to hiring and hire the minimum requirement that they need. But the overhead, again, according to the Yale School of Medicine for these 88 healthcare systems, is based on a profitability that is 95% of the net income. If it's based on 95%, it's not like it's like, okay, we're gonna spend 30% of the profits on actual healthcare. And that's the number we're using. Could you imagine if instead of 95%, they were to go to what is still shameful, 80-20? Could you imagine they took the 5% and they expanded it 15% more to 20%? You probably would not have a nursing crisis, right? You probably would have much better patient wait times, much better patient outcomes. EDs would not have to have so many admitted patients without beds. People wouldn't have to wait so long for a doctor. There'd be more, X-ray techs and people who are able to do CAT scans, and probably more CAT scans in the actual hospitals, and it would just make everything better, right? So yeah, for the people that are like, hey, overhead and profits and this and that, but what is profitability based on? How much money? How much percent of the pie do you need to have that you're basing that number on? I hope that makes sense to people. And as you get older as a man and as a healthcare provider, these numbers, they just keep disappointing me more and more and more. It's like, you want to do the right thing. You want to be a nurse. You want to help people. Nursing school. If I didn't have the GI Bill and the ribbon program, I would have had to shell out between $50,000 to $70,000 a year to be a nurse. Come on, it's ridiculous, ridiculous. And then when you get there, there's a nursing shortage, which means they're not going to, which is basically they're not hiring enough, right? So now you got people pining for the same job. You got these nurse residency programs that are just, they're good, but you're not gonna make top dollar, right? They're gonna hire you for the lowest amount. And that's why a lot of young people are just they're fed up and they're struggling because now you got this mountainous debt from school and you're trying to have this career. You're not making enough. You can't pay your bills. There's inflation. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. So, how much controversy can I pack into one podcast? How many controversial topics? I'm going to talk about one more based on an article I just read that New York State seems to be paving the way to joining states like Vermont and Oregon and a handful of others in legalizing assisted suicide. Now, I'm not going to moralize over this topic. I'm just going to report some of the facts that are coming out from this. Um, a story real quick. An ex-girlfriend's father, he was a retired police officer. He was 62 years old, and he was diagnosed with it was Alzheimer's, but it was a different form of Alzheimer's. He was told that he was going to, instead of like a gradual descent, it was going to be more like falling off a cliff. So it was, and they didn't know when it was going to happen. Like he was just going to be kind of okay, and then just sudden steep drops in cognitive function. And it scared him like it would scare anybody because it's hard to wrap your mind around something like that. And he said to his family, um, if we don't do something about this, I'm just going to put a gun in my mouth and shoot myself. He meant it. He meant it. He meant it as I would mean it in a situation like that. The man's a police officer. Weapons are not boogeymen to him. If he's got to take a gun, put it in his mouth, and pull the trigger, he will, right? So I'm not sure what they were considering. I think, but well, they got it in writing. They did the legal thing, and so when he's at a certain point, they were going to, go the assisted suicidal path. They were talking about a country in Europe at the time that they would have to buy property in. Maybe they utilized one of our states. I'm not sure what they did. I I wasn't around for that. I would imagine that was quite a while ago. So I would imagine that he had the procedure done by now. So that was his situation. I have treated patients where I've seen their status, and I've said to myself, I would not want to be alive if this was me. It's honest. Like I would not want to have to endure this, or face, or have my loved ones endure this. I would just rather not be here. And if I was informed of the same sort of, if I had the same diagnosis as that 62-year-old retired police officer, I may, I can't say I wouldn't want to go that route. Now, I thought this was very interesting. So Canada has implemented this Canada-wide starting in 2016. And it's called Canada's Medical Assistance in Dying Law, or MAID, M-A-I-D. Like I said, it was legalized in 2016. As of 2021, this is reported by the BBC, the average age of a MAID recipient was 76, 80% received palliative care, and 65% had cancer. Now, one of the things that they're pushing for, some people are pushing for, is to um, extend MAID, the Medical Assistance in Dying program or law, to include those suffering from incurable mental health illness or non-curable mental health illness. Now, the Canadian Mental Health Association has warned that it is, quote, not possible to determine whether any particular case of mental illness is incurable. I have to say, I'm kind of flummoxed when it comes to this. So, if somebody is suicidal, can they decide that they just want to have assisted suicide? I go back to Rollo May. He wrote Sophie's Choice and Set This House on Fire. He's a really great novelist. Hey, folks, just to correct myself one more time, I mean William Styron. I'm going to catch myself later. When I'm talking about the novelist who wrote Sophie's Choice and Set This House on Fire and Darkness Visible, among many other great novels and works, I mean William Styron. He wrote a book called Darkness Visible. I suggest everyone read that. It's a small little book, very thin, written in the 90s. He had become suicidal throughout the 80s. It was a clinical depression, real bad case, and wanted to die. And he went through all of that, and he came out of it. So it's like, can somebody who is suicidal, which is clearly a mental illness, if he would have decided that to go through that procedure in the 80s, he never would have recovered from it and enjoyed his life in the 90s and so on and so forth. As nurses, suicidal patients require a one-to-one and extra care, and that they from my perspective, I don't think that they are able to make choices like that. But this is something, or like I said, the Canadian Mental Health Association doesn't think it says it's not possible to determine whether any kind of mental illness is incurable, right? So in that case, what was the name I used? Did I say Rollo May? No, William Styron. I hope I said William Styron before. William Styron wrote Sophie's Choice, and he wrote Darkness Visible. But William Styron, but if William Styron had chosen to end his life in the 80s legally, if that was a possibility, it would have been a mistake. Would have been a mistake. There is a organization called Dignity Canada that wants to allow what they call mature minors to be allowed the right to choose MAID. As of 2023, 71% of Canadians support this. Now, that's a whole different beast. Mature minors, as young as 12. Now, to be fair, I'm going to report something that the AP wrote, and I'm also going to report something that they wrote that kind of turns this on its head. The AP refutes this. They had an article that was entitled, Canada isn't pushing minors to end their lives. Current euthanasia laws don't apply to them anyway. And they wrote that the reason why social media users are making this claim is that it's based on a screenshot from a website of an independent organization, Dying with Dignity in Canada, or Dying with Dignity Canada, which is advocating for certain mature minors with severe medical conditions to be able to end their lives. And the screenshot showed a photograph on the top of the website with the caption that said, with the appropriate safeguards in place, mature minors should be allowed the right to choose MAID. Now, they're saying that's why there's this misinformation online about it. But then I researched more, and as of February 2023, this is reported by Teresa Wright of Global News. A special joint committee of MPs and senators, this is again Canada, concluded that minors deemed to have the appropriate decision-making capacity should be eligible for assisted death. I just think it's a slippery slope. I don't, I for one don't believe a minor should be able to choose death. I don't know, that's just me. I can sympathize for somebody like in the example I had mentioned earlier, a 62-year-old man with a diagnosis like Alzheimer's that is going to be incredibly rapid and unpredictable. I can understand a situation like that. Um, if you want to extend it to, I don't know, this incurable, I don't know, what does that mean? Bipolar, certain forms of depression. I don't know about that. And certainly, this idea of mature minor. I'm sorry. Is a kid a kid? Because I'm a parent. And I mean, you know, what does that mean? Treating this like a checklist, meeting like, okay, let's see if you qualify for assisted suicide, shall we? Sit right in the chair. Thank you very much. Would you like some water? How about a lemon? Would you like some crackers? Hey, Jill, bring her or bring him this and that. Let's see how it goes. Let me have my checkboard here. Like you're filling out an MRI form. It's kind of ridiculous to me, but that's what I believe. What do you believe? I'm very interested in knowing. Please DM me, message me, do your research, point out flaws in my commentary, please. I love this stuff. I love reaching out to the medical community, and I love reaching out just to people in general. Like I said, you could find me on Instagram at nurse.dad. I also post videos and shorts and clips on YouTube. That's at nurse/dad. And of course, my website, mynursedad.com. Until our next episode, stay hungry, be humble, Nurse Dad out.